Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter McLeod, editor of Logistics Business Magazine.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Peter McLeod, and I welcome you all to this latest edition of Logistics Business Conversations. It's entitled AI for Smarter, More Efficient and Resilient Business, and is brought to you by Transporion. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by my guest, Jonah McIntire. He's the Chief Platform Officer for the Transportation and Logistics segment at Trimble. Now, perhaps you can quickly tell the listener who you are, who are Trimble, and who are Transporion, and why you are the perfect guest to be discussing AI technologies in the supply chain.
Sure. So again, I'm Jonah McIntire. I run the product and engineering, so a combination of the Chief Product Officer, Chief Technology Officer for the transportation segment. The transportation segment of Trimble's about a $550 million US dollar per year revenue business. It's seventh largest supply chain software company in the world. Transporion is an acquisition that was made 2 years ago into this segment. It makes up about close to half of the revenue, and therefore it's a pretty significant contributor. It also is a pretty good template for the future of the business being kind of a platform that people join. That's part of how we see the future of the whole segment. For me personally in AI, I'm deeply passionate about AI, if I'm honest, and I've spent a lot of my career in applying AI to the logistics decisions, key logistics decision space. Previously, that was the statistical AI, where you optimize things and you forecast things, and what we would now call kind of data science. And then in the last 3 years, actually before ChatGPT, was starting to apply generative AI also to the space.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to be talking a lot about AI over the next 30 minutes or so. But I want to make it clear to the listener that, rather than dancing around the theory of where AI could or might impact on the supply chain, we're going to drill right down with Jonah into just exactly what the evolution of AI technology means to you, whether you're a retailer, shipper, or carrier, and how it can help your business to become more competitive today. So, Jonah, let's jump straight in. AI is truly everywhere. It's in every conversation I have with every expert in the supply chain every single day of my working life these days. It's a real buzzword. So I want to start off, and I'd like to ask this at the start of our Logistics Business Conversations episodes. What's a common misconception about AI in logistics that you often encounter? And how would you sort of clarify what AI truly means in this context when we go beyond the hype?
Most people are still applying a paradigm from the statistical AI or symbolic AI age. So what that means is that they think AI is equivalent to data science. Therefore, they are inhibited by the fact that they don't have good data. They tried some projects 5 years ago to predict when something would happen or forecast something, and it didn't work. And so on this topic, they go, yeah, we really need to focus first on our data. The latest generation of AI, generative AI, is more equivalent to just raw intelligence. It's a very unique, clever 23-year-old who can come into your business and you can multiply them like 1 million times if you want to. So that 23-year-old is not inhibited by the fact that you have kind of messy data. They're typically inhibited by other things, like they don't know what they don't know. So you need to be very explicit with them about what you want them to do, just like you would with someone you hire as a 23-year-old. You spend a month or more onboarding them. But the misconception here is that it's somehow boosting up from your data into an automation. It's not that, actually.
Now, logistics, I mean, my goodness, there's a lot of data, isn't there? It's all about data. Transporion, the platform Transporion, does connect shippers, carriers and retailers on a massive scale. So how does Transporion use AI, and what's the philosophy behind Transporion's approach using AI when it comes to leveraging it across such a vast network?
Yeah, we have a couple of principles we apply. So one is we really don't get into, in the case of Transporion, we really don't get into a problem space if it can be solved by one business alone, so one party alone. We're looking only at problems that rightfully sit at the intersection of multiple businesses. So as an example, straightening out your rate management and being able to kind of explore your own rate tables if you're a shipper, for example, or deciding how to reply to an RFQ, like strategizing about how to reply to an RFQ. Those are kind of within one business. There's no reason for those things by necessity to live on the internet because they just need to be accessed from within one company. And there's other things such as running a procurement event or providing, say, status updates on a shipment. They have to be born on the internet. They are inherently multi-party problems to solve. So the reason this matters for AI is that the data sets that we accumulate, they are very unique. They are not just a copy of our customers' data. A typical conversation we'd have with somebody, particularly new customers, they'd say, well, we don't want you to use our data. And you'd have a exploratory conversation and say, well, what do you mean by your data? And then say, well, let's say they're a shipper, I do my procurement through you, so I don't want you to use the rates. And he's like, well, that's not your data, right? Like you described services you wanted. Well, it's your data. And then a bunch of other companies provided rate proposals. That's their data. And then, hey, by the way, our software automates and cleans up and, does some degree of negotiation or matchmaking, and it suggests, say, companies you'd never heard of before. So that's kind of our data. And that together is this very unique data source. Like no one party could recreate that on their own. Now we let everybody use that data. It's not like we corner it and sort of close our arms around it, but it leads to, if you think about training AI on something, it means we're training it on something that is pretty unique. So that's one principle we have. Another principle we have is, I love opinionated products. I love making products that, you may disagree with the opinion, but you can see it embodies a point of view, right? And our opinion on this is that you should go for maximum autonomy of software. You shouldn't stair step your way through automating like step by step, little increments until you get to an autonomous decision making by software. You should just go as fast as you can to autonomy. And so, at most conjunctures where we could deviate between, let's make software that simplifies the user experience, but there's still a user in the seat. And there's maybe another way we could go, which is let's just eliminate the need for the user to be there at all. Let's take the decision on their behalf. We edge towards we take the decision on their behalf. And I think that this can feel a little scary, like it's an opinion. People can disagree with it. That's how that is. But if you're someone who fundamentally agrees with that direction, then this is going to be the best software for you, because it's really going for the full realization of autonomous decision-making by software.
That whole space about the human side, the human interface is something perhaps we can move on to shortly. But I think for our listeners who heard me at the top say let's get practical, but they'll want to know how this is going to affect their daily operations. So are you able to sort of share specific examples, specific customer examples? We've talked about how we could sort of optimize procurement, but what about things such as managing transportation processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in these cases, like let's take a situation where a shipment is underway and some percent of shipments get stolen, or there's been an operational error where the wrong goods have been loaded onto a truck, or the truck has been given the wrong indications of where to go. For a variety of reasons, this can happen, but it's a minority. So it's not like this is not a 10% of the case. These are 1% or sub 1% type outcomes. And yet when they happen, they're pretty important, pretty impactful. So given that context, now what you have in operations, both on the shipper side and on carriers, so the asset operating carrier, is you have operations which are intended to detect such situations and to detect them as early as possible with as few kind of false positives as possible. And this is exactly so for just to give a concrete example of this, like the carrier may do check calls with the driver, where are you at right now? They may look at their telematics if they have access to the telematics. Sometimes they subcontracted and they don't have that. So it can be the case. And the shipper will do things like ask for an ongoing telematics feed or at least a status update on a periodic basis. In these cases, what we have is AI that is kind of sniffing at this full data stream of that's available and the just continuous updates that it provides. I mean, you can imagine telematics in particular is a kind of every few seconds you're getting a new ping of where a given vehicle is at and attributes about it, how fast is it going, and that kind of thing. Imagine you've got all this information and the truck begins to deviate from its expected route. Well, at some point it's deviated enough that you call it and say, hey, someone should look into this. And the question is, well, how far is that? There's a right answer. Like statistically, this isn't a taste thing. This is if you go back in time and you try to check, like, well, what was the deviations of the one that they were fine? They were just going around an accident on the highway. And others were like, the truck was being stolen. Like that's what was going on. Or the truckload was being stolen. And so you can sort of tune based on the past data. You can tune in and learn of what's happening. Those would be concrete examples. Another similar but shorter concrete example is when you think about how you bubble this data up into actionable information, it turns into things like, besides the fact that it's being stolen, it also turns into real-time, accurate estimates of when vehicles will arrive at pickup and delivery points. And then, interestingly, there's like a symmetry. If you're driving that truck, or if you're the carrier who controls the truck, when you're going to arrive. Like that's not news to you. But what you don't know is when you're going to leave. So these carriers care a great deal of like, okay, I'm at your site. I'm now queued up to be loaded. Like, when am I going to get out of here? Like, so they're looking for a different estimate. They're looking for the estimate to depart from the site, not the estimate to arrive. And so these are both clear places where you take large amounts of data, you learn from the past, and you give to a decision maker a very clean signal of, this is when I think you're going to arrive, or this is when I think you're going to depart.
We did touch on it earlier about the sort of human side of working with alongside AI, and those who are working in our industry, it can be quite stressful. If you've got mission critical deliveries that are not hitting the slots, then that's on you. So you've got this tool that you're working alongside that's going to make you look good. So AI can contribute, I guess you'll agree, to the sort of the overall experience for logistics professionals. You could say make their jobs easier. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think it changes their jobs quite a bit. I think it's interesting that, if you go into a logistics operation, like a planning or dispatching office, the energy is kind of a firefighting type energy. It gets intense, right? You come in the morning, there's a lot queued up for you to look at. During the day, there's emergencies happening. Your best chances, best case is you leave the day with it mostly back under control. Sometimes you leave the day and things are really like not cleared, but you have to hand it to somebody else, or you just have to wait for the next day. And I believe the people who are drawn to and stay in this work, in part, it's not that maybe they enjoy that, but that is attuned to their personality. And I doubt if that part is going to go away in and of itself, because I think that there's the nature of the work is such, and the people who work in it are kind of tuned into that kind of work. But I suspect that the level at which they're operating will change. So, for example, a planner or a dispatcher who's firefighting today, I think will become within a few years, maybe 4 years, will become a AI boss over 4 or 5 agents who are firefighting on their behalf. Now, they'll be essentially covering 4 to 5 equivalent, like, volumes of work is what they do today, but the feeling of intensity will remain.
Maybe as AI and the use of it evolves, there'll be less need for firefighters because the fires shouldn't start in the first place. Fingers crossed. Let's see what the future holds for us. I was going to say, the sort of the well-known phrase, a house is as strong as the foundation it's built on. And, with AI, it's as good as the data that you feed into it. So from Transporian's perspective, or from the perspective of getting the most out of that platform, what would you say were the key data points or types of data that are most critical to get right when you feed them into AI to deliver the greatest benefits?
So what's interesting is it's not the data points like price points, actual transit time, that kind of information. It's the procedural information. So let me take price, for example, because we have market insights that we publish, benchmarking, or telling people on demand while they're doing a procurement event or while they're responding to a procurement event, what is the market price? Like, that's one of our services. But you'd be surprised. If you take that data, it is like much less important to know what is the final agreed upon rate than it is to know how did you come to that rate. So if I take something like salaries, so human compensation for work, right? There's one data set which is what did you finally agree to. There's another data set that is how did you arrive at that, and that might be, did the worker accept the first offer? Did you have to make 2 or 3 offers? Is this the first candidate who you made an offer to? Are we on like the 5th candidate? Were there sort of unspoken verbal or unwritten verbal commitments in that, hey, we have pay raises in 9 months and you can be included in that, something like that. And this is so important information. And it's the information that's largely not within the system of records of companies today. It's in the way of working minds of the employees. And it's exactly the data that AI needs to be able to enter the workforce effectively and do the kind of jobs that we want it to.
So how do you turn that into data then, that knowledge?
Yeah, you train them. Here's a case in point. Using generative AI, we have an agent now that does the vetting, the verification of the identities of the companies that are joining our platform. We have about 140,000 companies on our Transporian platform, mostly in Europe. There's some in the US as well. Each time one of them joins, it is a potential fraudulent event, right? They could be purporting to be a company that doesn't exist, or more often they purport to be a company that exists, but they're not the rightful representative of that company. So I could be Jonah McIntire representing DSV or C.H. Robinson or something, and that company exists, but I shouldn't be able to speak for them. So we have to do a vetting process for the good of our community, and also like legally, like we have to make sure these people aren't on sanctioned entity lists, that they aren't doing business in Russia, in ways that are sanctioned, that kind of thing. So you need to vet these companies about once a quarter, as our interpretation. You have to recheck them about once a quarter, and 140,000 companies checked once a quarter. Even if it just takes a few minutes per company, you're talking about 10 people, something like that, who this is full-time work. We created a generative AI based agent. I mean, it has more to it, but it can use tools and stuff. It can use the internet, and it takes over this work. And so we went from a need of over 10 staff to 0. So it goes from 10 to 0. It's full, complete automation. But in order to do that, we had to train the agent. It's not like we had just data that we could hand to it. We have to train it as if it was a new employee. We have a procedural book that it needs to follow. We can fine tune it. It needs to use our tools, like our ticketing systems. It needs to be able to use our systems of record. It needs to be able to search the internet, those kind of things. And I think that this process, by the end of the year, we'll start offering agents like this for hire to our companies. But I think this is within everybody's ability. Like, this is directionally what I would expect the world to be going through. Is there's work that you have, it's well defined. You could give it to a 23-year-old, a smart 23-year-old who is diligent could do it if you gave them instructions how to do it, and you just have to go through the motion of actually giving them the instructions.
The supply chain industry in particular is greatly affected when there's geopolitical unrest. And at the time of recording, something's happening at one point in the world today, which at the time will be released, may not be happening or may have escalated. And today we know who our friends are, or we think we do, and tomorrow they may not be our friends, and vice versa. And that's the world we live in. Now, the logistics industry, somehow we still seem to get through it every day. We still seem to hit our targets one way or another. So how can we now use AI to just ensure that we've got that robustness, that resilience for businesses when we are faced with these unforeseen challenges? It could be a volcano, could be a stuck canal, a blocked canal.
Yep, absolutely agreed. What we anticipate, what we see happening in our own business already as we deploy these AI agents into various roles is that we end up with this strange tapestry of some jobs and some roles become extremely agile and reactive in the sense that there is very little or zero delay between new data, new events, like new action taking place and their reaction to it. It's like there's these little pockets where everything moves at light speed. What's interesting is that it's a tapestry. It's not like two large land blocks or something where you have AI world where everything's super fast and reactive and like no delays. And then you have human world where it's, the same speed it was in 2023. There's like an archipelago where there's these little islands of light speedness. And in between them, there's long stretches of human speed. I suspect that the islands get bigger over time, but there are some things that they simply lose their meaning if they're rushed. So building a relationship with your customers or your suppliers, evaluating your employees, establishing trust, within a team. Those are things that I don't see a way to make those light speed, because the process which underwrites it, must be done at human speeds. And then there's others where, although the light speedness kind of can happen, it then has to pause to wait for a human to say, yeah, that looks good to me, or that's what I wanted. So you get sort of three types of speed. You get the stuff where AI can itself validate, like, is this correct? So if it has ground truth and it can go and validate for itself ground truth, then it can just move on at its own speed. Then you have the second one, which is it can do all the work, but it needs an approval. It needs a reaction from a human. And then you have this third one, which is it just doesn't have any meaning if it's not done by a human. Forming a customer relationship is when it's like, it just doesn't have a meaning unless you're dealing with another human. And I suspect when it comes to these world events, wars, natural disasters, trade barriers, whatever, that it will traverse all three. So you wake up in the morning and you will find that, to take a natural disaster example, there's been floods or something, everything's been rerouted already, didn't need any human intervention. Then you have something where it also suggests not replying to, on an RFQ, or not, let's say you're a carrier, like not replying to an RFQ until the way that you would have yesterday because there's a potential for significant market disruption. But that needs human intervention because that's your business. Like you got to approve that. And then there's this third, which is like queued up. You probably need to call these customers because their facilities and their staff may actually be affected by the flood. And that's something where you first and foremost need to show care for the human beings impacted, not the business, right? So I think all three of them will be taking place.
Yeah. It's reassuring to know that that there is a space for the human side to be slotted in alongside the future technology there. It's always good to hear. But, I was just wondering what from your customer's perspective, what do they expect from AI-powered solutions? What are you hearing from them? Because are they after sort of just automating more systems? Are they after reducing headcount? Do they want some insights and that they can, actionable insights? Do they want more sort of predictivity and predictability in the supply chain? What are they asking you for?
Yeah, I mean, AI for them is just a means to an end. So the end has always been the same. It's first and foremost, they want to improve their revenue. If they can't do that, then they want to lower their cost to the extent that they can do both, they want to stabilize the variability of their operation and eliminate downside risk as much as possible. And that's it. I mean, there's edge case stuff, but in the main, in a meeting in which customers asking us about AI, they're really asking, can this lift my revenue? Can it lower my costs? Can it make my operations more predictable and standardized?
Pre-AI era, that was always the case. Post-AI, it'll always continue to be the case.
Yeah, because they are not a logistics operation. Fundamentally, is not a technology lab or something. It has a job to do for both for its company and for the world, and it just wants to do that job to the best of its ability. AI is a tool in the same way that maybe mobile phones in the past were. Like when that wave came out, people had similar, is like, okay, is this going to help me boost my revenue? Can it lower my costs? Can it make my operations more predictable? And then, if it doesn't do those three things, you're really in the long tail now of concerns. For example, with mobile phones, that I don't know if you remember this, but that was the moment when business systems really started to democratize, because people are like, hey, my mobile phone experience is so slick. It's so nice. Why when I log into SAP, why does it have to be so bad? And, or I can install an app on my phone. Like, why do I have to go through corporate IT to get anything installed on my laptop? And that was really a moment where things started to loosen in the business systems kind of controls in companies. So there may be, but that's really second or third order impacts, the primary thing. Now, what's interesting, the thing you mentioned just before that, which is this like, it's nice to know there's a role for humans in the future of AI. I actually think that motivates a lot of the conversations too. People, I don't want to call it fear, but people have a anxiety, and they want to hear perspectives on what is rightfully the role of a human being in a world where so much appears to be automatable. I don't know. For you, I'd like, let me turn the tables here. Do you have anxiety about AI displacing roles?
I really do. I'm a content producer. If I relied, or if I based my career entirely on the written word, I think I would be redundant before I retire. But one thing that cannot be replicated is what you and I are doing today, which is you could say, there's human chemistry in our conversation. It's not just a transactional conversation. That's probably the side where my anxieties are less. But, I do lean on AI when it comes to carrying out fundamental tasks that could be time consuming. And I could see that, previously I may have paid somebody to do that. For example, translating from English to another language. And somebody isn't getting paid as a result of the fact that I'm not using a translator, a professional translator. However, somebody is getting paid because somebody has designed AI to carry out that function on behalf of the translator. And there are a team of translators behind AI that will eventually get paid probably a lot better than a freelance translator ever would. So yeah, it's slightly different, but also parallel in the experience of working in the media.
Yeah, I think media actually has interesting parallels to software. In media business, you hope to make, for example, a great piece of content, which is then sort of revenue generating many, many times over. In software, traditionally, you've wanted to make a great piece of software, which then can be sold many times over because each additional sell is high incremental margin. In a similar ways, like you make a great movie or podcast or something, every additional listen or watch doesn't add much cost. It sort of is all upside. What's interesting is, so let's just for a second, let's play the thought experiment. A couple of years from now, you can sort of on demand get an agent that resembles a very smart, 25-year-old, and it is able to use all the tools you ask them, go browse, go write in Word or Google Docs, whatever you use. I think that this sounds quite scary to people, but I would point out that there are folks, like I have a team of 1,200 people. If we're talking about artificial intelligence, they are human intelligence. They are fully intelligent, human. They can use all the tools in the world that we're talking about, and yet I seem to add value somehow. So I think that the world we're heading towards is one of just massive like managerial leverage. So the people we think of as individual contributors in the future will be more like AI bosses. They'll have 4 or 5 of these agents that they're supervising. They're ultimately accountable for their actions. There's like a moral, legal, ethical element here where they, as a society, we're simply not willing to accept like that agents are moral agents in the sense that they can be punished or something. So they'll be accountable for their agents' access. They'll be like the fingers of these people rather than the brains. And I if we look at how humans do this with other humans, that's what we call like the management track or the leadership track of careers. It's just that in the future, instead of having to deal with attitude problems and lack of motivation, which I think many people go into management and then they decide, I don't want to spend my life in that. Like I didn't get here in my career to do that. I got here in my career to like make an impact in the domain that I work. And they kind of head back towards, actually, I want to be more like a very well-respected individual contributor. I believe there'll be more people like that, less drama in the management role, but everybody doing some degree of management.
Yes, and I think elements such as empathy, diplomacy. It's taken human evolution multiple generations to get quite good at that. Or indeed, are we any good at it at all yet? I think it's going to take us somewhat longer to replace those with something that can replicate them in a better way. That's my view anyway. I have to say also, Jonah, I know this is logistics business conversations, but I'm really not used to being asked questions back by the guest. So this is again, this is a real turnaround, and I'm loving it. However, we are reaching the point towards the end of our all too soon towards the end of our allotted time, and I think it's ended on quite a good note. But I want to say, I've really enjoyed chatting with you about the impact that AI has had and is having on our working lives. Never thought I'd be asked about mine, but also particularly how Transporion's taking a lead in how AI is being harnessed very much to the benefit of the customer. And thank you for those examples of how the customers are benefiting from that. So to conclude, I just wonder, and sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, but is there a piece of actionable advice that you can offer to a business today that's considering or maybe just starting their AI journey in logistics? A bit of advice that's going to help them get the most out of the technology.
If they're really at the very first moment of playing with particularly generative AI, the most actionable advice would be to go add ChatGPT to your mobile phone, or Gemini or Claude or Grok, any of these frontier models, and put it into voice mode and kind of force yourself to spend 30 minutes a day for a week in discussions with whichever of those tools you chose. Ask it to teach you a new skill. Ask it to help think through competitive forces in your market. Ask it to help you research your target sales prospects. Or to help you prepare and role play for a hard conversation with a colleague or a direct report that you need to have. Those are all like concrete examples that most leaders who are listening to your podcast would have. They would have one of those in their mind. And from personal experience and from the experience of others, the frontier models are a superior sounding board, strategist, or coach for any of those topics compared to most of the staff that you would have access to. And their time is essentially unlimited. They'll work when you want to. And the voice mode really gives you an idea of the future user interactions that we'll expect. Voice mode is pretty incredible. You put on a pair of headphones, go for a walk or do the dishes or whatever it is you do when you're away from your screen, and you just talk to an artificial intelligence, which will interact with you in that modality very naturally.
My mum always told me to be suspicious of people who talk to themselves in the street, but I think nowadays we're going to have to treat them as the most intelligent of us all, not the opposite.
That's right. Time has come, yeah.
Thank you, Jonah. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It gave me some fascinating insight there. Thank you also to Transporion for supporting this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. And thanks also to you, the listener, for joining us today. wherever you get your podcasts from, please do subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Jonah McIntire.
Pleasure to be with you today.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye.